The static crackled in Captain Sarah Chen's headset, but she didn't need clear audio to understand what was happening. The panic in Lieutenant Commander Morrison's voice cut through every layer of interference. Viper 1-1, this is Trident 6. We are taking heavy fire. I say again, heavy fire. We have 3 wounded and are pinned down. Grid follows. Sarah was already banking the A-10 Thunderbolt too hard to starboard, her gloved hand steady on the stick despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Below her, the Hindu Kush mountains stretched out like broken teeth, their peaks catching the last rays of sunset and turning the snow-capped ridges into rivers of blood-orange light. Trident 6, Viper 1-1 copies. Stand by. She was supposed to be calm and collected up here, a combat pilot with 8 years of experience and 2 deployments under her belt. But right now, listening to those SEALs fight for their lives somewhere in the valleys below, she was just a woman who knew she was the only thing standing between 12 operators and a very bad ending to their day. Viper 1-1, this is Raven Actual. Colonel Patterson's voice joined the net, and Sarah's stomach dropped. You are not cleared hot. I say again, not cleared hot. Intel indicates civilian structures in that grid. Hold position and await further guidance. She glanced at her fuel gauge. 28 minutes of loiter time. The SEALs didn't have 28 minutes. They probably didn't have 8. Raven Actual, Viper 1-1. Advise you have friendlies in contact. Viper 1-1, I'm aware of the situation. Rules of engagement are clear. No strike without positive identification and civilian clearance. Raven Actual out. The line went dead, and Sarah was alone again with just the rumble of her twin turbofans and the increasingly desperate calls from Trident 6. They'd briefed the mission 12 hours ago. A high-value target, some Taliban commander who'd been coordinating attacks across the province. The SEALs had infiltrated under cover of darkness, moving through terrain that would make a mountain goat think twice. The snatch and grab had gone sideways when they'd been compromised by a shepherd boy who'd stumbled on their position. Now they were surrounded in a compound at the edge of a village, taking fire from 3 sides, and the quick reaction force was still 40 minutes out. 40 minutes they didn't have. Sarah had been flying a racetrack pattern 10 miles south when the first call came through. Now she was overhead, circling at 15,000 feet, her targeting pod slewing across the landscape as she searched for the compound. The lightening pod's infrared display painted the world in shades of white and black, heat signatures blooming like flowers against the cool earth. There, she found them. The compound sat in a shallow valley, 3 mud brick buildings arranged in a rough U shape around a central courtyard. She could see the hot signatures of the SEALs clustered in the northernmost building, and the distinctive heat bloom of their weapons as they fired. Surrounding them, at least 30 hostiles maneuvered through the other structures and along the compound walls. Trident 6, Viper 1-1 has visual on your position. Marking now. Sarah lays the target building, double-checking her coordinates against the grid Morrison had transmitted. They matched. Confirm you are in the northern structure. Over. Viper 1-1, affirm. Northern structure. We've got tangos in the other 2 buildings and moving in the open. Request immediate CAS. Over. Sarah's finger hovered over the weapon release button. The GU-8 Avenger rotary cannon, affectionately called the gun by every A-10 pilot who'd ever flown, sat in her aircraft's nose like a promise. 7 barrels. 70 rounds per second. Each round the size of a milk bottle, made of depleted uranium, capable of shredding tanks and turning fortified positions into memory. She could end this in 30 seconds. 1 pass, east to west, stitching a line of devastation through the southern and western buildings while keeping her fire well clear of the SEALs' position. She'd done it 100 times in training, 20 times in combat. She was good at this, maybe the best in her squadron. But Colonel Patterson had been clear. Not cleared hot. Civilian structures. Rules of engagement. Trident 6, unable to engage. Raven Actual has denied clearance due to. Viper 1-1, we're going to die here. Morrison's voice had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. Acceptance, maybe, or just exhaustion. We've got 3 bleeding out. QRF is too far. You're all we've got. Sarah pulled her aircraft into a tighter circle, losing altitude as she tried to spot any sign of civilians in the compound. The lightning pod showed nothing but heat signatures carrying weapons. No women. No children. No non-combatants that she could see. But she couldn't see everything. The intel report had been clear. The compound was at the edge of a village. There could be families in the adjacent buildings. There could be kids sleeping in back rooms, grandmothers huddled in cellars. The kind of collateral damage that ended careers, sparked international incidents, and gave the enemy propaganda victories that lasted years. She thought about her own career. 8 years of clawing her way up through a service that still wasn't entirely comfortable with women in combat roles. The whispers in the ready room. The doubts disguised as mentorship. The 1,000 small battles she'd fought just to be allowed to fight the big ones. One unauthorized weapons release could end all of it. Viper 1-1, Trident 6. Multiple KIA if we don't get support. Please. Morrison's voice cracked on that last word, and Sarah felt something break inside her chest. She'd met the lieutenant commander once, at a base barbecue 6 months ago. He'd been grilling burgers with his shirt off, showing off the kind of stupid tattoo that every SEAL seemed to get after their first deployment. His wife had been there, pregnant with their second kid, laughing at something he'd said. He'd shaken Sarah's hand and thanked her for keeping pilots like him alive. Now she was going to let him die because she was afraid of what might happen to her career. Fuck it, she whispered. Sarah keyed her radio. Trident 6, Viper 1-1 is inbound hot. Danger close. Mark your position with IR strobe. Viper 1-1, Raven actual, you are not cleared. She switched off that frequency. The A-10 responded to her hands like it had been waiting for this moment. She rolled inverted, pulling the nose down toward the earth, feeling the A-frame shudder as she pushed past the aircraft's optimal dive angle. The compound rushed up at her through the HUD, lines and symbols dancing across the glass as the computer calculated trajectory, wind speed, altitude. The infrared strobe appeared in the northern building, the SEALs marking their position. Sarah adjusted her run, lining up on the southern structure first. Her targeting pipper settled on the building's center mass. At 5,000 feet, she opened fire. The GAU-8 didn't sound like a gun. It sounded like the world ending, a grinding, tearing roar that vibrated through the A-frame and turned the air itself into something solid. The recoil actually slowed the aircraft, fighting against her forward momentum as 70 rounds per second reached down and touched the earth like the finger of God. The southern building disintegrated. There was no other word for it. One moment it was a structure, walls and roof and the lives inside it. The next moment it was dust and debris and the ghosts of structural memory. The depleted uranium rounds didn't just penetrate. They obliterated, turned solid matter into mist. Sarah pulled up hard, feeling the G-forces compress her into the seat as she climbed. Her vision narrowed at the edges, gray creeping in despite the pressure suit inflating around her legs and abdomen. She rolled left, coming around for another pass. Viper 1-1, good hits. Good hits. Morrison's voice was electric now, alive with desperate hope. Western building, Western building. She was already lining it up. The western structure had hostiles pouring out, running for cover, some of them trying to bring up heavy weapons. Sarah put the pipper on the doorway and fired again. The BRT sound echoed off the mountains as another stream of depleted uranium rounds carved through the building. She walked her fire along the western wall, methodical and precise, a surgeon with a 7-barrel scalpel. Men died without ever knowing what had killed them. The building collapsed in on itself, adding its own dust to the cloud now obscuring the compound. Sarah climbed again, circling back to assess. Through the targeting pod, she could see the remaining hostiles breaking contact, running for the village proper. She had maybe 5 seconds to make a choice: pursue and eliminate them, or let them go. She let them go. Trident 6, Viper 1-1. Compound is clear. I say again, compound is clear. Recommend you consolidate and prepare for QRF link-up. Viper 1-1, Trident 6. You just saved our lives. All of them. How copy? Solid copy. 6. Happy to help. The words felt inadequate, small things to put against what had just happened. Sarah turned north, heading back toward base, and switched her radio back to the tactical frequency. Colonel Patterson was already there, waiting. Viper 1-1, Raven Actual. You will proceed directly to base and report to my office upon landing. Your weapons release was unauthorized and in direct violation of my orders. Do you understand? Raven Actual, Viper 1-1 understands. Viper 1-1, be advised that this incident will result in a formal investigation and likely court-martial proceedings. You have ended your career, Captain. Sarah looked out at the mountains, at the valleys where 12 men were still alive because she'd made a choice. She thought about the pregnant wife at the barbecue, about the kids who would still have a father, about the operators who would make it home to tell their own stories. Raven Actual, Viper 1-1 copies all. See you on the ground. The flight back took 20 minutes. Sarah spent it watching the fuel gauge tick down and thinking about what she'd say to the investigators. About whether she'd been right or wrong. About whether saving lives justified breaking rules, or whether civilization depended on everyone following the rules even when it hurt. She didn't have good answers. The base appeared ahead, its runway lights cutting through the gathering darkness. Sarah brought the A-10 around on final approach, dropping her landing gear and feeling the reassuring thunk as they locked into place. The touchdown was smooth, professional. She'd done this 1,000 times. As she taxied toward the hard stand, she could see a cluster of vehicles waiting. Security forces. The Provost Marshal. Colonel Patterson standing with his arms crossed, face unreadable in the dim light. Sarah shut down the engines and sat in the silence for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain away. Her hands were steady on the controls. No tremors, no shakes. She'd made her choice, and she'd live with the consequences. The canopy opened, and the night air rushed in, cool and clean. She unstrapped and climbed down the ladder, her boots hitting the tarmac with solid authority. The security forces personnel moved forward, their faces carefully neutral. Colonel Patterson approached, and Sarah snapped to attention. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression still unreadable. Captain Chen, you will accompany these personnel to headquarters for debriefing. Yes, sir. You violated a direct order. Yes, sir. 12 SEALs are alive because of it. Sarah said nothing. There was nothing to say. Patterson stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. The investigation will take 6 weeks. You'll be grounded pending the outcome. The book says I should throw you out of the Air Force. I understand, sir. But Morrison is already calling everyone he knows, telling them what you did. By morning, this story will be all over JSOC. You're going to be a hero to every special operations unit in the theater. Sarah finally met his eyes. With respect, sir, I don't care about being a hero. I just care about those men getting home. Something shifted in Patterson's face. Not quite a smile, but something close. Good answer, Captain. Now get out of here before I remember I'm supposed to be furious with you. The security forces personnel led her away, but Sarah looked back once at her aircraft. The A-10 sat on the hard stand, its ugly, ungainly frame somehow beautiful in the runway lights. Battle damage from small arms fire pocked the fuselage. She'd been too focused to even notice taking hits. The aircraft would be patched up and flying again within days. She wasn't sure the same would be true for her career. But as they loaded her into the vehicle and drove toward headquarters, Sarah found she could live with that uncertainty. Some things mattered more than careers. Some choices were worth making even when you knew they'd cost you everything. 12 men would go home to their families. 12 lives saved by a forbidden strike and a pilot who decided that some orders were meant to be broken. That was enough. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood at attention in the base commander's office. The investigation had concluded. The report sat on the general's desk, 200 pages of testimony, satellite imagery, and legal analysis. General Martinez looked up at her. Captain Chen, the investigation determined that your actions, while technically in violation of operational orders, were justified under the doctrine of immediate necessity to prevent loss of life. The Rules of Engagement Committee has revised the engagement protocols for close air support in extremist situations. Sarah kept her face neutral. Thank you, sir. You're not being court-martialed, Captain, but you are being transferred. Her heart sank. Transfer meant desk duty. It meant the end of combat flying. You'll be reassigned to Nellis A Force Base as a senior instructor in the weapons school. Your job will be teaching the next generation of A-10 pilots when to follow orders and when to trust their judgment. Sarah blinked. The weapons school. It was one of the most prestigious assignments in the Air Force. Your class begins in 3 months, Martinez continued. Until then, you're grounded. Use the time to figure out what you're going to teach them. Dismissed. Sarah saluted and turned to leave, her mind already racing ahead to lesson plans and training scenarios. As she reached the door, Martinez called out, "Captain." She turned back. "Morrison sends his regards. His kid was born last week. A girl. They named her Sarah." For the first time in 6 weeks, Captain Sarah Chen smiled.